What if a child looked at their mother and calmly described a home they had never seen, a family they had never met, and a death they should not be able to remember? Across villages, cities, and quiet suburban bedrooms, children have spoken names, places, and secrets that seem to belong to someone else's life. Most people dismiss these moments as imagination, but some cases are so specific, so disturbingly precise, that they have drawn psychiatrists, historians, and scientists into one of the strangest and most controversial investigations on Earth. This is not simply a story about ghosts, belief, or folklore. It is a story about memory itself, about identity, and about the terrifying possibility that consciousness may not end where we think it does. If even a fraction of these accounts are real, then death is not the boundary we believed it was. It may only be a door. In a small room before sunrise, a child sits upright in bed, breathing hard, eyes fixed on a place beyond the wall. He is too young to know war, too young to understand death, too young to invent the details he is about to whisper. He tells his mother that his real home is far away. He says he had another name, another wife, another street. Then he describes the moment he died. The room goes silent. Outside, morning arrives as if nothing has changed. But inside that house, reality has already begun to fracture. Stories like this have emerged for decades from places separated by language, religion, and culture. India, Lebanon, Myanmar, the United States, Sri Lanka, Turkey. Again and again, children between the ages of 2 and 6 begin saying things no one around them can explain. They speak of former parents, forgotten villages, hidden money, old professions, murders, accidents, even funerals they insist they attended from the inside of a coffin. Most forget these memories as they grow older. That alone would make the phenomenon strange. But what makes it unsettling is the precision. In some cases, investigators found that the names, locations, family structures, and causes of death matched real deceased people the children had never officially encountered. For scientists, this should have been impossible. Childhood memory is fragile, suggestible, and easily shaped by adults. Imagination is wild. Coincidence is common. Human beings are natural pattern makers, desperate to force meaning onto chaos. And yet a handful of researchers refused to look away. The most famous among them, psychiatrist Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, spent decades collecting and comparing cases from around the world. He documented thousands, not dozens, thousands. He did not begin as a preacher of reincarnation. He began as a physician trained to doubt. But the more testimony he gathered, the more disturbing the pattern became. Many children did not merely claim a former life. They displayed phobias connected to the alleged death, behaviors matching the previous person's habits, and, in some cases, birthmarks corresponding to fatal wounds described in medical records. Those details pushed the investigation beyond folklore and into territory where skepticism itself began to feel unnervingly unstable. That is where the mystery stopped sounding mystical and started sounding dangerous. Because once a child points to a scar on their chest and says, "This is where the bullet entered," the question changes. We are no longer asking whether humans tell strange stories. We are asking whether memory can survive the destruction of the brain. We are asking whether identity is more portable than biology. And if that is even remotely possible, then every modern assumption about consciousness begins to shake. Materialism, death, selfhood, the clean boundary between one life and the next. Suddenly, the phenomenon is no longer a curiosity from spiritual traditions. It becomes a direct challenge to the deepest architecture of the modern world. But there is an even darker twist. Some of the most compelling cases are not peaceful. They are violent. Children waking in terror, children screaming about drowning, fire, knives, gunshots, crashes. Children begging not to be taken back to the place where they say they were killed. In several accounts, families followed the clues only to uncover deaths, feuds, or forgotten crimes buried beneath silence. If these memories are fantasies, they are astonishingly structured. If they are real, then something passes through death carrying fragments of pain. And that leads to the question no scientist, skeptic, or believer can answer with confidence. When a child remembers another life, who exactly is doing the remembering? If Part 1 opened a crack in reality, Part 2 forces us to look inside it. Researchers who studied these children found that the strangest detail was not only what they remembered, but when the memories appeared. Most cases began between ages 2 and 4, when language was still forming and social conditioning was weak. The children often spoke spontaneously, without hypnosis, without prompting, and without any desire to impress adults. Many seemed irritated when no one believed them. They were not performing. They were trying to describe a life that still felt unfinished. Then, just as strangely, the memories usually faded by age 6 or 7, as though whatever window had opened between identities was slowly closing. That pattern fascinated investigators because it hinted at a hidden mechanism, even if no one could agree on what that mechanism might be. Some psychologists argued that children absorb scattered information from overheard conversations, television, family gossip, or local tragedy, then unconsciously reshape it into a personal narrative. Others pointed to cryptomnesia, the mind's ability to remember facts while erasing where those facts came from. Neuroscientists added another layer. The young brain is not a stable archive but a storm of rewiring, pruning, and reconstruction. In such a storm, false memories can appear with terrifying certainty. On paper, those explanations sound strong. In practice, the strongest cases kept slipping through them. Some children named obscure villages they had never visited. Some recognized former relatives from photographs mixed with strangers. Some led adults to houses hidden behind roads they should not have known. That was why psychiatrist Stevenson, and later researchers who followed him, treated these accounts less like campfire stories and more like field evidence. They compared statements before verification. They checked hospital records, death reports, maps, family histories. Again and again, ordinary errors appeared, but so did a smaller set of cases that felt unnervingly resistant to dismissal. Each theory explained part of the puzzle, yet never all of it. The phenomenon remained like an ancient lock touched by many keys, but opened by none. Then came the detail that made the mystery darker. Some children were born with unusual marks or deformities that seemed to correspond with injuries described in the lives they claimed to remember. A child terrified of water spoke of drowning. Another recoiled from loud noises and insisted he had been shot. A third, born with malformed fingers, described losing them in a machine. Critics warned, rightly, about coincidence, selective attention, and cultural suggestion. Extraordinary claims demand pressure, but even under pressure, some cases refused to collapse. And the deeper researchers went, the less the phenomenon resembled religion and the more it resembled trauma. Many children did not recall heavenly visions. They recalled interruption, panic, impact, and unfinished fear. That twist changed everything. Maybe the mystery was not immortality in any romantic sense. Maybe it was transmission, not a complete soul moving neatly from one body to another, but fragments of identity surviving like embers carried by wind. A pattern, a residue, a memory burned so deeply into consciousness that it crossed some invisible threshold. That idea should have made the story smaller. Instead, it made it vast, because if fear, memory, or selfhood can survive in fragments, then the human mind may be participating in a reality science has barely begun to map. We may not be looking at proof of reincarnation. We may be staring at evidence that consciousness obeys laws we do not yet understand. If so, these children are not telling stories. They are standing at the edge of an unknown frontier. What makes these cases so unsettling is not only the possibility that some children remember another life. It is what that possibility does to the story of being human. For centuries, civilization has rested on a quiet assumption: one body, one mind, one lifetime. Law depends on it, medicine depends on it, identity depends on it. We are born, we gather memories, we move through time, and then we vanish. That is the contract beneath modern life. But if even a few of these children are recalling something real, the contract is incomplete. Consciousness may not be locked inside the skull like a prisoner in bone. It may be part of something larger, something we enter briefly, then leave, while fragments of us continue moving through the dark. That possibility turns a strange childhood story into a challenge to memory, death, and the boundaries of the self. That idea is not merely spiritual. It is destabilizing. Because once identity becomes transferable, the meaning of childhood changes. A toddler is no longer only a beginning. A child may also be an aftermath. That would explain the eerie maturity some cases seem to carry. The sudden grief, the strange loyalties, the fears with no visible source. It would also force a darker possibility into view. Perhaps human life is not as cleanly separated as we want it to be. Perhaps the dead are not fully gone, and the living are not fully new. Somewhere between first breath and final silence, there may be a continuity science has not measured. Not a ghost story, not a sermon, but a hidden law waiting for the right tools, the right courage, and the right question to drag it into the light for the first time. And that law may involve consciousness, not belief. And yet the implications grow even larger when we step beyond individual cases. If memory can survive death in fragments, then history may not be as buried as we think. Trauma may echo further than a single generation. Violence may leave marks deeper than flesh. The wars, disasters, losses, and cruelties of civilization may not simply disappear into archives and dust. Some part of them may remain active, seeking voice through the most unexpected witnesses imaginable. Children who have barely begun to live. That possibility changes the meaning of compassion. A stranger's suffering may not be as distant from us as it appears. The boundary between my story and your story may be thinner than language, culture, or even death itself. What we do to one another may travel farther than we can see, farther than we can measure, and longer than we dare imagine. Through time, through memory, through mystery. This is why the phenomenon refuses to stay inside religion, psychiatry, or folklore. It touches something older and deeper than category. It asks whether consciousness is produced by the brain, or only filtered through it. It asks whether memory is stored like data, or woven into reality like gravity, invisible until something falls. It asks why children, of all people, seem closest to the threshold. Maybe because they have just arrived. Maybe because the world has not yet trained them to ignore the impossible. Or maybe because truth appears first where ego is weakest. In that sense, these stories are not only about what happens after death. They are also about what we lose as we grow up. Wonder, openness, and the instinct to trust what does not fit our models before we rush to erase it from the map of the possible. Before certainty hardens around us like a prison.